and it hits me, oh my gosh, this is that triangle.
You know, there's explanation for everything that occurred in the Rendlesham Forest incident that doesn't involve aliens at all.
It was completely silent. It comes right over our heads.
He saw a classic flying saucer, really, standing in the clearing.
He turned over to my father and held his hand, and he looked in his eyes and he said, "We're not alone."
Welcome to Podcast UFO for our live show. We're live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Please remember to visit the website podcastufo.com for past episodes, blogs, and forums. During the show, feel free to participate live in our chat room. And don't forget to like us on our very active Facebook page.
Hello, everyone. This is Martin Willis, your host, and we're coming at you live on the Dark Matter Radio Network, like every Wednesday at 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Well, except for last Wednesday, we did have a power outage. I apologize for that. We were still able to put out a podcast. If you missed that, you can catch it on podcastufo.com. Our featured guest coming up at the half hour is Linda Moulton Howe, and she'll be hanging in for both hours. But before that, we have Alejandro Rojas from Open Minds Radio, and he's going to talk about the latest UFO events. After the news, but before Linda, we have Richard Crilly, actor, producer, director of Milgram and the Fastwalkers, and Season 2 just came out yesterday. And that banner's right on the website. You can click it. It's a fun show to watch. Well, little housekeeping again. I hope I don't get sued for my penny false advertising in the last week's show when I announced that anyone who wanted to access the second hour of the podcast could subscribe for the affordable rate of only 99 cents a month. Well, I was wrong. The platform joyride.com only accepts dollar-even amounts. So it is $1, not 99 cents, and I apologize for that. So here are the details. You can listen for free right here on the Dark Matter Radio Network every Wednesday evening, but only the first hour will be made into a free podcast on podcastufo.com and all the podcast feeds. Subscribers will be able to access the second hour of the podcast on getjoyride.com/podcastufo. The link is right on our website. Subscribers pay only $1 a month or more to access the full 2-hour show. That's how it's going to be posted on there. Now, the one thing that's a little bit tricky, once you sign up there and you click the supporters link, you're supposed to copy the link that's in your browser and paste that in iTunes. It's clunky. It will be changed real soon. If you click on the studio button, you'll be able to play the extended podcast right there. I know this sounds a little confusing, so if you have any questions or concerns, please email me at martin@podcastufo.com. I get a lot of email. I'll try to respond to you as soon as I can. We have Alejandro Rojas coming right up. We have, after that, Richard Crilly on Milgram and the Fastwalkers. And at the half hour, we have Linda Moulton Howe. Alrighty, enough of all this. And how you doing, Alejandro?
Not too shabby. Doing well. How are you?
Good, except, last week was kind of a disaster with the power outage. And we had...
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, we had ice and snow today, and luckily it doesn't look as bad as it was last week. But, for the power to go out 20 minutes before a live show, luckily you and I had recorded ahead of time. But, it was... It took a toll on me. I was really upset because I knew there were
that's stressful.
All these people waiting to hear the show and couldn't hear it. But luckily, Lee Spiegel came through and we recorded it right on Thanksgiving Day. But I want to talk about you. Where were you? You were in Las Vegas?
I was in Las Vegas, Nevada, having a great time. Luckily, my girlfriend got this special package at the Wynn, where we got to stay a weekend and see a show. We actually got... Oh, and this is cool. Here's a tip for people. We went to one of those half-price tickets where you could get cheaper tickets day of a show because we wanted to see... She wanted to see Jersey Boys. And we were there, and the tickets were too expensive, so I checked on my phone, and they had a special mobile sale where you had to buy it on your mobile, and it was like half price. So check the mobile. This was at lasvegas.com. When you're going to see a show, check your mobile, like throughout the day, especially if you're buying day of. And there are amazing deals. So we got this incredible deal. We got to watch Jersey Boys. So we had a ton of fun out there. It was the first time I've been out there without work. Usually I go out there for the Atomic Testing Museum and the UFO events that they hold, or MUFON I was out there for. And this was the first time where I just got to relax with my honey bunny, and we had a really good time.
You didn't see any UFOs?
Well, kind of. The mall is... Oh, this is interesting, actually. The mall looks like a giant UFO. However, I didn't know this. We went downtown because she had not seen the Fremont experience before. We've been down there during the day, but she didn't see the whole video thing that they have above. And the video thing, we watched one of them, which was kind of 60s kind of style, and it said the next show will be in, 45 minutes, whatever, and it'll be about Area 51. Oh. And it wasn't about Area 51. Area 51 is kind of this catch-all phrase for some people about UFOs and aliens for some reason. But yes. It was UFOs and aliens. So there's these aliens, and it's like this abduction thing where they're prodding scissors into you and then prodding you with some kind of laser. And these aliens walking around, and then they have this really cheesy, here comes the jets, and like the Americans come in and blow up the aliens. It's probably a metaphor for something. And it's this whole alien thing, abduction thing going on downtown. I was really shocked by that. In fact, I'll put it up on my YouTube. I recorded part of it with the alien probing. That's really the most unnerving part. And I'll put that up on the YouTube for everybody.
Do you mind if I ask you what type of probing this was?
Well, it was some kind of laser device. You'll see it on the video. I'm not sure what they were probing, but it did not look like it was comfortable for the person being probed, nor did it seem benevolent. They seemed to be taking some sort of joy in the pain that their subject was in. So these weren't nice aliens.
That's too bad.
That's why the American jet fighters had to come in and blow the hell out of them.
Yeah, we need more nice aliens.
Yeah.
So what is going on for the news? We don't have a lot of time because I have Richard Cutting from Milgram The Fastwalkers coming up here in a minute.
Okay.
So why don't we buzz through the news this week?
Yeah, buzz through the news, a couple sightings, but I did want to warn everybody about this, and it's kind of an interesting story, that there was a story out there from KWBV News 6 in Phoenix, and they released some video saying, this is classified UFO footage of this dogfight over South Mountain during the Phoenix Lights in March of 1997. Already kind of dubious, some pretty lofty claims. Well, there is no KWBV News in Phoenix. In fact, I'm in Phoenix, and unfortunately, you turn it on to Channel 6, you're not going to see this. You go to the website, and it's apparently fake. The journalist writing for this website is David Collins, and every story is written by him. Every story is about him, and he talks in the third person. David Collins did this. David Collins did that. Sounds like a Seinfeld episode. Well, it turns out that the guy in the video was a Seinfeld actor. Someone emailed us and said, hey, isn't that guy from Seinfeld? And we looked it up, and sure enough, because we knew this David Collins that was in one of these videos that they had posted had to be an actor, and that this whole thing was BS. And sure enough, he is that actor that was in a Seinfeld episode. So pretty funny. They have this show called American Crimes, and they have this whole story they've got built around these missing people. They've got several pages that they've set up. So it's a really big, elaborate, viral campaign that it looks like they're doing. And you can see more about this. In fact, Linda High says she thinks that these are movie makers who approached her about a year ago, and speaking of malevolent and benevolency, they said they wanted to make this movie about how Phoenix Lights was about this battle between the U.S. military and the aliens, and she said she wanted no part of that because she feels that the Phoenix Lights was a very benevolent experience and that these were well-meaning aliens, and you've probably had her on the show. So
I did, yeah.
She told me about that. So I updated with our new discovery of this actor and some of the other information that we've gotten. So don't be fooled by that. Check out the story for more detail.
Do you think it's possible that people actually will be fooled by that?
I think certainly they will. And the sad part, you wouldn't think so, but if we look at the fourth kind as an example, I'm sure you get this. So many people believe that all of that was real and the stories related to it were real, but that's an example where they weren't. They were fake. In fact, they were sued by the Alaska Press Club for using names of real newspapers, claiming that these were stories that came from these newspapers. They lost, actually. They had Universal Pictures had to pay the Alaska Press Club for that because these were false claims. So a lot of people still, despite all of this information, believe the fourth kind stories. I'm sure we'll have comments to my comments here saying, oh, he's wrong, that was real. And so unfortunately it works.
Right, yes. I remember being contacted about that movie. People thinking that it was. You're right, totally bought into it. So yeah, those things happen. So the next one is something about Florida.
Yeah, a couple cool sightings, including this one in Florida. This was one where the witness says the UFO stopped traffic. So this was in Port Charlotte at about 6:30 p.m. on November 30th, where he says there were some cars stopped, and there was a pretty large white orb that people were watching moving overhead. They were looking up. He said he heard a low humming and saw this white large orb floating above. He said one person even put his head out the window and yelled, "What the bleep is that?" So he said it scared him really quite a bit because this person lived near a military base and has seen lots of stuff, but nothing like this. But this is a story that's getting quite a lot of traffic for us right now, so that's an interesting one. And that's a MUFON story written by Roger Marsh. And another MUFON story from Roger Marsh is one where this UFO allegedly engulfed this person in a white light in Washington. So this is in Randall, Washington. This was on November 25th, around the same time, actually, 6:55 p.m. Of course, those are different time zones. But he went outside because supposedly there might have been flooding. There was raining. The news said, there might be some flooding. So he went out to the creek to put the flashlight on the creek to see, how much the water was coming up. When they went out there, suddenly they say a bright light hit them from the southwestern sky. And it was this big beam of light. They looked up and they said there was this round, apparently round object, because they could only see the bottom, that was beaming this light on them. After a period of time, the beam turned off, but the light was still on the bottom of this craft. So they watched it for a period of time before it was gone. But really interesting sighting in Florida here that was reported recently. So, yeah, a couple really cool sightings that the MUFON has received.
When you first said that it was engulfed, I thought like it, took them away type of thing.
No, luckily it did not, and they didn't experience that Fremont Area 51 alien experience. But so these might have been, some nice guys saying, hey, or maybe they were helping. They saw the guy flashing the light. This is my new theory. They saw the guy flashing the light on the creek to see if it was flooding. They were like, hey, that guy needs some help. So they flashed their big light, their giant light, to help him look at the creek. Freak the guy out, not on purpose. But, they were probably helping him out.
They may have left their probes at home as well. You never know.
That's possible. Yeah. But I'm going to go with my happy Joy story.
I actually like that better, too. Hey, thanks so much, Alejandro.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
We'll be talking to you next week. And if you stay tuned, we have a little bit of Milgram and the Fastwalkers music. And right after that, we'll be on the line with Richard Crilly. Richard, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Martin.
I always sweat it, when this is live radio and I dial a number. I'm Skyping out at you. How you doing, Richard?
I'm terrific. I'm so happy to be back on Podcast UFO.
Yeah, Richard, I got to tell you were on last year, and you were joined by the beautiful Walker Hayes and Johnny Alfonso. How do you say his last name?
Yeah, Johnny Alonso.
Alonso,
yeah.
And we had a great time. It was a lot of fun. And unfortunately, you were going to be on last week with Walker, but it just didn't work out with the power outage. But I got to tell you, ever since you were on last year, you've been a real supporter of my show, and I really appreciate that.
Well, I just find the quality of your show prep and your guests are just, it's what ufology needs. I've been following it for a long time. I don't make a claim to be a ufologist proper, but I always learn something, Martin, and they're always so well organized. And, you could it's like a college course every week, and I really appreciate your show, and that's why.
Well, thank you. And I want to say, anyone listening live, you can join in the chat room if there's anything you'd like to ask Richard, and that's at podcastufo.com. Real easy sign in. So, Richard, I've watched all the shows, including this year's, and you can find that. Is it Milgram? What is the web address, actually, someone can find that at?
Yeah, the web address is www.fastwalkerseries.com, fastwalkerseries.com.
And, of course, I put a banner up on the website, our website. It's right on the sidebar. Anyone can go there. You can start at Season 1 if you haven't seen it yet. It's my opinion that you've stepped it up a little bit this year. And I don't know how you feel about that statement, but your intro is real classy, and everything just seems like it's up one notch this year. Was that your intention?
Oh, yes, and thank you for that compliment, Martin. What happens as sort of an inside track on that is, you start a show and the production team needs to kind of get with itself and in sync and everything. And by year 2, we're really meshed and working like a great team. And that's in consideration of the fact that we have over 80 speaking parts on the show, so it's quite a large show for independent television. But the goal was definitely, as we wade out into the broader story, to increase production values, and that's showing up in everything from the beautiful, gorgeous music we get from fabulous musicians around the world to our terrific actors, to opening up new locations. We'll be in New York. You'll see some action in New York this year. So, yes, that was by intention.
Now, I want to have you describe the show for the person that's just tuning in for the first time that is totally unfamiliar with it. Can you just give in a nutshell what it's about and what you... At one time we talked about it as being sort of like a soap opera, but now you're leaning more toward a drama. So just, if you would, the capsule of the whole show, if you would.
Well, absolutely. It sort of stems from my background as having looked at UFOs for years and having met many of the players. I knew Bud Hopkins and John Mack and so forth, and I was at the edges of the ufology community for a long time, and I always thought it was fascinating, and I wanted to do a drama about it, but I wanted to hew very closely to what they're actually doing in the ufology community. That said, I have to run a drama, so it is dramatic. We are a dramatic television show about UFOs, and we specifically go into the alien abduction phenomena. And as you know, and all your guests and listeners certainly know, that there are so many categories of interest in the ufology field, whether it's soil sample analysis or aeronautics or abduction. But this is the piece that we follow, and we take our dramatic point of view has always been a very simple thing. What are the effects on people when alien intrusion occurs? How does it affect people? So I like to say we're less about ray guns and more about the relationships. And from speaking to your guests that this alien intrusion can powerfully affect people's lives at all levels, professionally and with the kids and the doctors. And so that's been our point of view, and it felt a little bit like a soap opera. I used to say it's a cross between General Hospital, In Treatment, and Fire in the Sky. So if you think of those kinds of dramas, it's sort of like that.
And let's talk about. I know when anyone is doing anything independent like you are, this is a web series type situation. And did I remember looking on Facebook last year, you won some type of award? I hope I'm not putting my foot in my mouth.
Yes, no. We've been up for several. We've been nominated by the Indie Series Awards 2 years running. We won the special prize that gets you into the Marseille Web Fest, and that was at the LA Web Fest 2 years ago. We won the Young Guns Award in the DC Film Festival, and we were nominated by Hollyweb, which is another prestigious web festival. So between the Indie Series Awards and the Hollyweb Festival and the others, it's been very well acclaimed, and we had over 2 million, something like 2.5 million episode views within our first 2 months. So believe me, it was a surprise to me, but we were wildly popular in our first season.
That's wonderful. And I think we have some type of deal, don't we, that if you film next year that you're going to have me in as a walk-on?
Martin, the door is open, and not only will you walk on, but we'll give you lines, and we'll give you some real good business to do on camera.
I could have played the mechanic, the mechanic in there.
Oh, yeah, that's Kevin.
The dysfunctional mechanic. I could do that well if he calls in sick. Call me up. So let's talk about, we'll talk about season 3 and all that. And how does one get money doing what you're doing? How do you survive? And is this your own, out of your own pockets, so to speak? Because this has to be expensive to do something like this.
Well, yes, it is. It's at the quality that we shoot, it depends on several things. Either you can have money, and that's a great thing for getting that kind of quality, or if you don't have money, you've just got to have really, really good people who are dedicated to it. And we're in the latter category. The way the web series world works is, to be honest, there is no coherent revenue model yet. These shows are the good ones, and all of them are basically out there. With the exception of maybe the Europeans, the Canadians, or the places where the government does help the creators. But the creators are out there doing it basically out of their pocket and out of their love, and the actors and the crew are doing it for the same reasons, because we all view this as a way to tell stories that are unrestrained by, some of the normal format restraints. So, and that's a huge thing for creators, but there really is no revenue model, so we pay for it out of pocket.
Wow, that is something. I'm looking on the chat room. We do have a chat room, and if you'd like to ask, someone just posted a nice compliment. Thank you, Steve. You can go to podcastufo.com, jump in the chat room, and ask Richard a question. Now, when you first started this, did you do like an Indiegogo or Kickstarter or something like that, or did you just dive right into it?
Well, in the first year we dove straight into it. I had scripted it, and I've got 4 seasons scripted. We've shot 2. I've got 2 more seasons all ready to go. And then we did an Indiegogo at the end of season 1 to fund season 2. To be honest, the monies we raised were significant, and we are so jazzed about our contributors. I mean, people were just so heartfelt about the show, and we're so thankful to them. But it didn't pay anywhere near what the cost of production is. So, we may go out for another crowdfunding round, but we are looking for, legitimate investors for the project, much in the way an investor would invest in an indie film. Because the script is written and we're ready to go. So we're looking for any and all kind of revenue models or investment models, and then revenue models. So we're open for business in that regard. But at this point, we're just funding independently still.
I kind of look at it this way. If I was working for a radio station, which I never would or never thought of, I'd get paid. Doing the podcast, I was actually losing money. That's why I'm on a little bit of a fun drive myself. So I understand kind of in a roundabout way what we're all up against. A lot of people have access to do things they never did before.
Correct, yeah.
Like, 15, 20 years ago, I would have never thought I'd be doing what I'm doing now. So we all have like the access to that if we have the ambition to do it. But there's so much out there free. No one really wants to pay. It's really you're up against that. That's the double-edged sword of it all.
Well, I think there is this attitudinal shift, correct. I think there's a lot of more media than there ever was, so the fracturing of viewer or listener attention is huge. I do think the wind is at our back to technology. For you to be able to do your show and us to be able to do our show is incredible. I mean, I would have had to go out and buy a Panavision camera to do what I do years ago. So, and I think the world is a better place because people like you, Martin, who are so focused on exactly what the hot topics are in ufology, and you can get legit experts. I think, this is a wonderful age, and on our side of the fence, for creators to tell stories that are deep and broad. I mean, our show really, at this point, is a miniseries. It's not a network format. It's not a cable format. We're going and we're going and we're going until the story's told, and that's never been really the case for storytellers.
Now, just a little side note here. One of the shows I really like, I spoke to Alejandro Rojas off the air earlier,
sure.
And he's not a fan of the show at all, but I love it, and that's House of Cards. You were in the House of Cards, and you're in again next season, right?
Yes. What a wonderful show. People have various opinions about it, and I think that's a good thing because when you have a show that's so exquisitely written and so beautifully executed, it's going to send a lot of signals out there, and it just, my experience in working with them is just great. They're just really wonderful, from the way you're treated to what it's like to work with some of these fabulous actors and directors and shooters. And so I will appear in season 3 when they premiere the show over the winter, and it was a great experience.
Oh, I bet. Richard, we have just a couple of minutes left here, and so one of the things, it seems to me that not only did you support the show and get emails from you, but you also participate a little bit on the Facebook page. And I really appreciate that. On all the people you said you've talked with Bud Hopkins before, and who are some other people you've actually interviewed or talked to in the past?
Well, my definitive piece was John Mack. I can't remember which publication it was, but back in '93, he was deep into his experiencer program and really doing good work there. And then Bud was very active then too, and they were in fact, good friends. And at that time, I was able to interview him for a magazine, and the interview is still up there. They, John passed away, but they do maintain an archival site for him.
Right.
Bud Hopkins, I knew. I used to go to the conferences a lot more than I do now, but, I've had a long conversation a couple of years ago with David Jacobs out at the Ozark Conference, who's wonderful. Linda Moulton Howe, I've known since the 90s, and she will be on your show soon, I understand.
Yep, just 2 minutes.
Yeah, I'm so happy to hear that. I love her stuff. I mean, she's just been at it for so long, and what a high quality investigative journalist. So I've been in touch with, oh boy, I can't tell you how many people I've talked to in sidebar conversations at the conferences. So many of them.
That's right. Now, we only have 1 minute left or so, but I just wanted to ask you, in the real world out there, when people know that you're doing an, alien abduction series, does that ever cause you any trouble?
Well, that remains to be seen, because one of my things is I really want to respect the ufology subject matter and the people who do such very, very hard expert work in it. And yet, as a dramatic storyteller, I have to do dramatic things. And this season, we are going to go into what it's like on the table, so to speak. And I will know more about what the audience thinks about me vis-a-vis alien abduction in about 6 weeks when it's all done, because we go into some of the gritty stuff. And that's my commitment. Some of the things that happen up there to these folks, is not a day at the beach. And I've spent a lot of time with abductees and people who know abductees and work with them, and I'm trying to tell the story as straight as I can and still have a drama, you know.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great.
It's not dramatic inherently.
Yeah. Richard, thanks so much. It's been a real pleasure, and I hope to talk to you soon, and I can't wait to be in Season 3 and a speaking part. How about that? That's exciting.
You're in, Martin. You're in. Done.
All right.
Thank you so much.
All right. You take care now. All right. Linda Moulton.
Good to be with you.
Linda Moulton Howe is coming right up. Linda Moulton Howe.
Hi, this is Linda Moulton Howe.
Oh, no.
Please leave a message after the tone. Thanks.
Yeah, we gotta love live radio. I just spoke with her just a few minutes ago before the broadcast. Pardon me, everyone. We're going to give her another shot here. That sounds better.
Hello, this is Linda Howe.
Well, hello, Linda. How are you? Martin Willis here.
Oh, good to talk with you.
And yes, we had a little trouble with your phone, but we're so glad we got through.
Well, I think it is that a computer tech called, and I thought it was you, and I had to get off, not knowing if you were calling when they called. So that would have been, if that's what you got, that's what happened.
Yeah, so everyone live heard your answering machine.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being on. It's been a real pleasure speaking to you earlier, and I'm pretty excited about tonight's show. And we have anyone listening live can jump in our chat room at podcastufo.com. And then the first half hour or less than a half hour that we have now, I'd like to speak to you more or less. Can we go right back to the beginning, way back to when when Alien Harvest, I want to find out what was the brainchild in that, and what were you doing before that whole thing?
We need to start, I think, at Stanford University, where I did my master's degree work in documentary films, and that was between 1966 and 68. I graduated in 68, and in those 2 years, I made a documentary film for the Stanford Medical Center, a film that they used for 19 years after that. And my master's film was with the Stanford Linear Accelerator when they were just trying to teach computers, rudimentary computers, software that would be able to begin trying to analyze the bombardment of particles at the accelerator. And that's what I did my master's thesis about. And upon leaving Stanford, I was hired and worked in news in Los Angeles for KNBC. And I was covering all kinds of subjects, a lot having to do with science, environment, and medicine, which has always been my beat. I was married, and my husband went to Harvard, and I transferred from Los Angeles and NBC to ABC and WCVB in Boston, where I produced medical programs for 2 years. And then we took a position in Denver, and I was hired as director of special projects at the CBS station there. So I went NBC, ABC, CBS. And in my job, it was my task each year to produce documentary films, news segments, and live studio programs about issues in science, environment, and medicine that were affecting the state of Colorado and the surrounding region. And in that context, in the summer of 1979, while I was working on a completely different subject, the headlines in the Denver Post and the Rocky Mountain News were about all of these unusual bloodless excisions from animals, mostly cattle and horses, but affecting every other domestic animal you can think of, affecting deer and elk and other wild game. And when I finished my summer 79 project, I wanted to find out and talk with sheriffs and ranchers about this strange unusual animal death problem. And I began my first phone calls in September of 1979, and within a week or two, I was headed up to Sterling, Colorado, to sit down and talk with Sheriff Tex Graves, who had just retired after a quarter of a century of being sheriff of Logan County. He had been investigating the bloodless, trackless animal mutilation since the very early 70s, and when I went to a vacuum cleaner shop where he had retired to, he had a big box that was full of some offense reports and 266 color Polaroids that he had personally taken of a lot of the cases that he had investigated, and he let me lay them out on the floor like a canasta game, and I did it by chronology. My mind works best when I can lay things out in the timeline in which they occurred. And as I was laying out the Polaroids, I came to one particular animal, and I asked Sheriff Graves, what in the world happened here? It was a large animal. He said that it was a big steer. It was lying on its right side. Its forelegs were neatly out to the side, but the head, totally bloodless, absolutely pristine, but the head was down in a hole that looked like a fresh hole. And Sheriff Graves said that when he and the deputy approached this particular scene, they walked about 12 to 15 feet away. They didn't walk toward the animal. They did not want to contaminate the scene. So they walked in a large circle, and he took some of the Polaroids from taking that walk. And he said they realized that in the powder dust of the ground with tiny sparse grass, there were no tracks, not even that large animal's tracks. And yet they were looking at an animal that was clearly dead with its head hanging down in a hole. When they finally walked forward and they began to touch this animal, he said this was one of the fresh ones that was almost warm to touch still. And the only thing that they could conclude is that they were dealing with something that had the power to take the left ear, eye, the tongue, jaw flesh, genitals, rectum, and the tail had been removed at the base of the tail of the spine on this one, and do so without leaving any blood. There was nothing on the ground and no tracks around the animal. But they figured that what happened is that whatever did this, paralyzing the animal so it could not move while the excisions were made, the head was left in a kind of agony, and that the animal could only move its head and had dug the hole during the process.
Wow.
I just was going to conclude, that was the most sobering moment at the beginning of investigation when I was still on, we'll call it, the normal social side of Alice in Wonderland's mirror. And from that trip, those Polaroids, those offense reports, talking with that just retired sheriff about his years of investigations, and at the end, just before I left, he said, Linda, let me save you some time. The perpetrators of animal mutilations are creatures from outer space. And he gave me the reasons why. I had to drive home 2.5 hours from Sterling, Colorado to my home in Littleton, Colorado. And my entire life, since I was a tiny child, I had loved astronomy. I had begged my father when I was 4 years old for a telescope. I had spent, I had spent hundreds of evenings of my life by myself with a telescope, concentrating on the sky. I had never known fear. I had never known nervousness about anything of being in the dark under the sky until that night. Wow. And as I drove home for the very first time in my life, I started looking at the sky with nervousness. I began trying for the first time to grapple with my head around what in the world from outer space would be taking animals or putting them on the ground and doing what I saw in those photographs, and why. And by the time that I reached my home, it was a catalyst of some sort. It was nerve-wracking at some degree, but overriding that was my own curious desire to get to the bottom of whatever extraterrestrials were doing on this planet that would be causing all these mutilations around the world. As I learned, they were far beyond Colorado. And in a way, as I talk to you tonight on December 3rd, 2014, so many years after that trip, I have walked 35 years in a growing number of different paths, all starting back from that conversation with Sheriff Graves. And that in these 35 years of thousands of other paths, still trying to understand why extraterrestrials would be interacting with this planet and harvesting, because that's what I think they are doing, harvesting material from animals in Earth life. Today, I can say that I have a little more knowledge. I have a little more understanding, perhaps, about why in World War II the Truman administration clamped a policy of denial officially on all things extraterrestrial, animal mutilation, crash discs, bodies, androids, and all of it. And that maybe they did something that was patriotic in thinking that if they would go 25 or 50 years without the world knowing the truth, that we're not alone in the universe, and that extraterrestrials have been interacting with this planet for not just hundreds of years, but millions of years, which they came to realize, that maybe coming out of World War II, maybe there was a kind of global social compassion in thinking that humans were not ready for dealing with extraterrestrials right out of World War II and the Nazis. But today, in 2014, animal mutilations persist around the world. There are cases every day, whether it's Peru or Argentina or Chile or Mexico or Central America or the United States or Canada or England or other European countries. It goes on. It has never stopped. And the two areas that I have found consensus of agreement on what the extraterrestrial agenda could be, when I have talked with people retired from government or military who have dealt with the non-humans personally, they agree that the categories I used in my very first book in 1989 called An Alien Harvest was, one, the material, some of the material taken from the animals is literally used for sustenance. Sustenance is another larger word for food. But it's my understanding that unlike the way you and I and our fellow humans will cook or eat raw vegetables, or we masticate, so to speak, with our teeth and drink fluids, that we're dealing with life forms that may have a genetic problem of their own, and that they may have to extract certain proteins to survive, and that is one of the applications of the animal mutilations. The second, however, is more disturbing, that genetic material has been harvested for a very long time on this planet in order to make clones, hybrids, organic containers that could live and survive and work in the particular gravity, in the particular atmosphere of this planet. And it's been suggested to me by people who have worked inside of this government and are now dead, actually, who talked to me right at the end of their lives, that we are dealing not with just one type of non-human intelligence, but competing intelligences who do not share the same agendas. And that there is geopolitical territorial conflict, and that in that conflict there is a political argument about what is allowable to do with life. And that part of that argument has to do that some are considered to be using cloning and hybridization way too much, and they are the ones that might have trouble surviving with whatever is their replicating genetic factor now. And the other side of this is that there are non-humans who see something definitely valuable in the evolution of the standing-up primates on this planet up to this particular variety now that we call Cro-Magnon, Homo sapiens sapien, and that in that argument about what is allowable to do with life, that there have been political arguments to get rid of clones and hybrids and genetically manipulated species, and then there have been champions of this DNA manipulated species called humanity who feel that we have a right to survive. Now, that is a sort of large overview of what I think is the largest box in which all of this is occurring. Can I prove it? No, I cannot. Do I think that some of the people, as a reporter, an investigative reporter and TV producer that I have talked to who have worked inside of agencies and groups that have been involved with trying to keep the extraterrestrial secret since World War II, do I think that some of them have told me facts? Yes, I do. Bottom line, there's not a single question in my mind, nor in Jim Marr's mind, nor several of us who have spent a lot of our careers trying to understand why our government has had such a strict policy of denial about something that seems so obvious to people in the human abduction syndrome, to ranchers who have seen these glowing discs over their pastures with animals rising or lowering in beams of light and found mutilated. And that when you stop and think that we are at the beginning of the 21st century, and that we are continuing on a planet that essentially is being kept in a concocted history, in concocted mythology, which is not mythology, that non-humans have interacted with this planet, and at times in Mesopotamia and Sumeria, the Anunnaki carved in stone in cuneiform. This was a real part of the history of this planet. And what does the cuneiform discuss? That they worked in laboratories and tubes, at least according to Zecharia Sitchin, making life forms, and that there were arguments between them 5,000 years ago about what they would do with the life forms that they made. Enlil and Enki were allegedly extraterrestrial brothers. They argued with each other. Enlil wanted to eradicate the human workers that they had made to mine gold, and Enki did not, and wanted humans to survive and to be stewards of this planet. Now, there are many, many historians, anthropologists, archaeologists, zoologists who would argue that the cuneiform of Mesopotamia is just all this carving was to perpetuate dreams and mythology. And I would ask you, do you think it's logical that 5,000 years ago there would have been all that work to record stories that were dreams and mythology? I mean, I'm serious. When you think about that, do you think that would make sense?
Yeah, Linda, I'm sorry. I'm reading on the chat room just right now. It's awful hard to say, really. But someone wanted me to take you all the way back to the sheriff. I was just reading, and I apologize for that. They wanted to know what the two reasons were. The sheriff said that he thought they were extraterrestrial, and what those two reasons were.
Because of what he had seen in the pasture with his own eyes over and over and over again, and that he contacted Bill Jackson, who was a reporter at a local newspaper in the Logan County area, and asked him to bring a professional camera They did time-lapse on tripods. There was nothing wavering. I met Bill Jackson. I saw his equipment. And night after night after night, they were taking photographs in time-lapse of bright white lights that were moving in these odd, bizarre patterns that were tracing in time lapses over and over. And in fact, there were so many people in the early 1970s who saw this light or lights and saw little lights moving into a big light. All of the things that Bill Jackson photographed, and these photographs that I'm describing were in the local newspapers. And people were referring to the large light that they saw little lights going in and out of as Big Bertha. And you will find newspapers in the archives of people reporting what they were seeing from their own farms and ranches. And Sheriff Tex Graves, many, many, many nights, was out working on animal mutilation investigations and would stand watching these lights. And then there were the ranchers that I've interviewed, he knew, that had seen beams of light come down out of glowing discs in the sky and watched animals, cattle, rise up in the beam of light or be lowered in the beam of light. How more vivid could a description of non-human, non-terrestrial technology be?
Right. Linda, when people come at you and say, look, this has a prosaic reason this is happening, it's animals, it's, predators or whatever it is, there's never any sign of struggle, is there? And no footprints up to it? And, of course, the lack of blood, that's awful hard for anyone to describe.
It did not take long, using the same kind of forensic approach as I had done at Stanford University, to work with people in universities, go to veterinarian pathologists, the people that I worked with, trying to find out what the hard evidence is. I will try to tick them off. Predators. In my book, An Alien Harvest, which there is a brand new second edition out that is totally updated on every page, larger than the first book in 1989. This book is one that has my skin, my blood, and my tears in it, because that was a time where it was so difficult to do the work that I was doing that when I finally went beyond the documentary and put it all in a book, it felt like I had survived at least that long to do a book. It had that feeling. And in that book are the documents, are the veterinarian pathology reports that say these excisions, and I'm thinking of one specifically in Oregon, done by a veterinarian pathologist at Oregon State University, and it says right in the document, the excision appears to have had intense high heat applied. Do not know if it was a laser.
Wow.
The question of laser. When I started working with hematologist and pathologist John Altschuler in Denver, one of the questions that he was curious about, what is, if we are a carbon-based life form, and if we go to any laser surgery, known laser surgery, whether it's on a horse, a dog, a human, a cat, laser surgery on carbon-based tissue, will there be a difference at that laser excision line compared to the excisions of the mutilated animals? So Dr. Altschuler went to a gynecologist in Denver and asked if he could get photomicrographs, which are photos taken under a microscope of tissue that would have been in normal gynecological or other surgery. And one day he called me up and he said, Linda, I would like you to come and I want you to show you something, and I don't want to talk to you about it before you've had a chance to look at it. So he set me down. He had a stereoscope, microscope. He said, look at the slide on the right, look at the slide on the left. Compare them and tell me if you see anything different. And it didn't take long for it to jump out to me that one of the slides looked like it had black pepper grains on it, and the other did not. And when I said that to him, he said, bingo, that's exactly it, Linda. The one that has the black pepper grains is laser surgery from the gynecologist. It's normal human tissue subjected to a laser. We're a carbon-based life form. You cannot do that. You cannot burn carbon-based life form tissue without having the residue of carbon, and that's what you're looking at. The other that has none is one of the tissues that you sent me from the mutilated animal that I had, I was going out into the field all over the place with formalin solution, plastic containers, gaffer's tape, scalpel, scissors, and FedExing tissue fresh from mutilation sites back to him to analyze. And this was one of them. So when I'm giving you only a few of those pieces of hard evidence. When you come to Predator, in my book, An Alien Harvest, I show one of hundreds of predator attacks that are organized in various Department of Agriculture books, state by state by state. They are education books. Anybody can get them. They go down through the list so that ranchers and other people can say, oh, this is the animal that I'm contending with on my ranch. And you look at them and you can tell what cats do. You can tell what foxes do. You can tell what crows do. You can tell what bears do, and so forth. All of the predator attacks, all, leave mangled, torn apart bones, scratches in the hides, big scratches that you would see from standing 10 feet away, and lots of blood on the hair or the fur of whatever the animal is. So predator, right from the beginning, anybody who had any knowledge whatsoever would automatically, looking at the pristine, bloodless, and no tracks around the bodies, that's another significant point, predators would have to leave signs of struggle around a dead animal. There are none. And when you go to satanic cults, I got a call from a detective in San Diego, California, probably around 1986 or 87. My film, A Strange Harvest, had been broadcast on May 25th, 1980, and throughout the 80s, I was being asked by people everywhere to present the film at conferences, to go and talk with sheriffs and deputies, and I did that with Dr. Altschuler. We would present evidence before law enforcement, and this was in keeping with getting a call from a detective in San Diego who was working with a sheriff's office there. And he said, we would like to fly you down here. We're convening a meeting of law enforcement from Arizona, law enforcement from California, and we would very much like you to bring your documentary, any current files. We'd like to have a big conference table, and we would like to lay out what we have, what you have, and compare. So I went with great interest. What is it that they've got? And on this day, they asked me first if I would lay out, and I had brought very current cases, and I laid mine out on the table, and the 2 or 3 sheriffs that were there with their deputies walked and looked and handled all of my photographs and the documents and the offense reports, and one sheriff turned to me and said, Ms. Howe, this is nothing like what we're dealing with. You don't have blood. You don't have tracks. You don't have symbols. And then they showed me. And I made a vow after that day that I was never publicly in any way going to describe what that law enforcement group showed me that day in San Diego of what satanic cults do.
Yes.
And it was incomprehensible, and everything they showed me involved blood. Totally 100% the opposite of the pristine, precise animal mutilations. I also talked with a Catholic priest early on in my investigation while I was producing the film A Strange Harvest. And the Catholic priest looked at all the photographs that I had and was gathering from law enforcement. We spent 2 hours in my office at Channel 7 in Denver. And he said, there's nothing that you are showing me that is in keeping with anything that I've ever encountered dealing with satanic cults. So that came from a Catholic priest, that came from sheriffs, law enforcement. Now, jump over to how counterintelligence takes advantage of human ignorance, and I use it respectfully. Humans are only ignorant when they are kept ignorant. That means when they are denied knowledge, education, and facts. Counterintelligence works by denying the public and the media education and facts. They do the opposite. They want to divert public and media attention from something that they consider to be top secret and they don't want anybody to pay attention to. So what is it that counterintelligence in the United States was doing during this period of time from the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, when animal mutilations were all over the place? They had people, obviously, who were planted to push satanic cult. And this was presented to me in a very surprising way when A Strange Harvest was first broadcast as a 90-minute special on the CBS station on May 25th, 1980. And it was only about 2 weeks later that at my office the phone rang and I answered, and it was a man named Lynn Lauber. He was the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in Calgary, British Columbia. He said, Miss Howe, I have been able to see your documentary. And that meant that somebody had copied it or taped it or done something from the TV set, I assume. And he said, I wanted to call you and I wanted to congratulate you for telling the truth. And I was certain, I remember that so clearly. I was taken back for a moment because the Royal Canadian Mounted Police for the entire year that I was working on A Strange Harvest were putting out headlines in several provinces saying that the animal mutilations, which they were having in the dozens all the time, was that the perpetrator was a satanic cult called O, the simple letter O. Even a small paper book was distributed called The Cult of O, and it was about teenagers being sucked into satanic cults to mutilate animals. So now I'm talking to the man who introduces himself as the investigator for the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in Calgary, which is where this information was coming from, and he's congratulating me for telling the truth. And I said to him, well, sir, I thought that you all were convinced that there was a satanic cult named O that was doing this, and he said, quote, unquote, oh, no, that's just been our cover to keep the public and media off our backs.
Oh, unreal. Hey, Linda.
And then he said, your film is accurate. And he said, I wanted to know, if I send you some photos, could you confirm for me that in the mutilation cases that you've investigated this year in the United States, are molars missing in some of the cases, and are dew claws? Those are the sort of like vestigial toes, so to speak, up above the hooves in cattle.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that dew claws, and I knew that molars were removed in some mutilation cases, not many, but a few. And I had been asked by Colorado sheriffs if I would keep that back from my public reporting just because they wanted to have one or two details in case there were mimics. So when Lynn Lauber from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police asked me that question, I said, yes, sir, I'm very well aware. And he said, I'd like to see your photos, and I'll send you mine. And we did that, and you could have put his photos and my photos on a table and mixed them up, and you would never have known what the different cases were.
Wow. Amazing. Linda, we're at a little past the top of the hour. So if anyone is listening live, please hang in. We'll be right back after a little quick music break. If you're listening to the first hour of the podcast on Podcast UFO, iTunes, Stitcher, all that, you can jump in and support the show for $1 a month, only $1 a month or more at getjoyride.com/podcastufo. That link is right on our website. When you support the show, you can listen to the second hour of this and all the other shows coming up and shows in the past. And check back with us next week. Listen to both hours live at the Dark Matter Radio Network. And keep your eyes to the sky. We'll see you next week.